There was once a local fellow named Vit who wildcrafted St. John's wort up in the clear cuts, making his living that way. He was a sinewy fellow, medium build, always had a smile on his face, smelled like garlic and sauerkraut, I seem to remember. Suffered terribly from sciatica, which is, as you know, the inflammation of the sciatic nerve that travels from the pelvis area down the buttocks and to the back of the legs and down the legs. So as he worked in the high altitude areas, he would wipe his sweaty brow with his hands and transfer in that way the hypericum from his hands onto his skin. And this caused a photosensitive reaction, which was a blistering of the skin above the eyes there. And I was quite concerned about it, and I recommended to him that he should use a handkerchief instead of wiping his hands directly on his skin. And he said, "Not only do I wipe my hands on my forehead, but I also wipe them everywhere else on my body. And the result has been that my sciatica is cured." So this story illustrates the sort of paradoxical nature of St. John's wort, which always seems to occupy two ends of the spectrum. On one hand, causing a photosensitive reaction, on the other hand, curing a deep-seated nerve affection. So there was a lady who took St. John's wort daily, 20 drops in water, to elevate her mood. And she was going to go in for dental surgery. So she did a little research about St. John's wort, and one of the contraindications is that it can encourage bleeding during surgery. So she thought it better to discontinue use. She discontinued use for some time. She went in, had the tooth extracted, and came back to home, and it was experiencing great nerve pain in the associated tissues. And so she took St. John's wort and put it in water and swished with it and spit, swished and spit, swished and spit. And it quickly killed all the nerve pain. So once again, the sort of paradoxical nature of the herb. On one hand, contraindicated prior to surgery. On the other hand, taking care of the nerve pain that occurs after surgery. There was a fellow named John who was making a St. John's wort oil. And as you know, you have to really mash the herb, really smash it before you add it to the oil, otherwise it doesn't extract. And oil maceration of St. John's wort only works with the fresh herb. It doesn't work with dried herb. How do you know? Well, the oil doesn't go red if the extraction is imperfect. And if the extraction is good, then the oil turns bright red, which is the color of the active compound. So he decided to put the herb in a blender to mash it up without any oil or menstruum added at all, just the plain herb. And of course, you know what happened. He turned on the blender and the herb jumped to the top of the blender and he got very little extraction. So he stuck in his hand, which is not recommended, to try to push the herb back down. And as he did so, he shaved off the tips of his fingers on the blender blade. And then after quite a bit of screaming and yelling, and a real bloody business it was, he realized that the best treatment for the fingers was going to be soaking in St. John's wort oil, because the ends of the fingers have a lot of nerves, and St. John's wort is one of the few remedial agents on Earth that will actually restore nerve tissue, and it helps build healthy tissue in general. And so once again, on one hand, injuring himself in the process of extraction, on the other hand, the remedy was the very thing which was causing the problem in the first place. The etymology of Hypericum perforatum. Perforatum is very clear. The identification is extremely important with St. John's wort because there are many members of the Hypericaceae that may resemble it, and only Hypericum perforatum is useful in herbal medicine. The rest are suspect. So you want to make sure that you've got the right thing. Perforatum refers to the leaf, which is seemingly perforated when you hold it to the light. And those are the pellucid glands, oil glands, that exist in the leaf. And this is a positive characteristic of Hypericum perforatum, so that you can be sure that you're getting the right thing. And then clearly the other circus trick is to smash the buds between your thumbnails, and you're going to get the red coloration, which is the active constituent hypericin. Contrary to one of the other videos that I looked at, this is not an alkaloid. It is a naphthoquinone derivative called naphthodienthrone, and it is the main active constituent of the plant. It's a red coloring agent, but you also have other parts of the plant, the whole herb, so to speak, that exert the influence. This would be the leaves. I mean, who wants to make a St. John's wort tincture without including those pellucid glands? Everybody needs one. And so those oils and the flavonoids from the leaf contribute to the anti-inflammatory effect of the plant, and also reduce the likelihood of side effects. So when you make the tincture, you always want to use the upper 10 inches of the plant, including the buds, flowers, and leaves, and stem. The stem is also characteristically grooved, which is another indication that you have the right species. The grooves alternate at each stem attachment. So they'll be on one side here, and then they'll be on the other side here. So it's known as a weed of waste places, and the cattlemen who run their cattle up in the fence-free free range dislike the plant, because when the cattle eat the plant, then they can develop a photosensitivity, and it also sort of drives them mad. Well, what works against madness in a human might cause madness in a bovine. You never know whether these things are cross species or not. And so the paradox is that the plant only grows in places that are disturbed, like roadsides or clear cuts or overgrazed land. And so it's not a food for the cows. But when the cows run out of other food, then the plant grows because the soil has been tortured. And the St. John's wort is there to heal the land, but then the cows eat it. And so what's at fault? Is it the St. John's wort for making the cows sick, or is it the cows for making the earth sick? Again, the paradox. The other part of the name, Hypericum, well, it is Greek. Hyper means above. Everybody pretty much agrees on that. The derivation or definition of icum is very much up for grabs. Some people say that it means something like a specter or a ghost, so above the ghost. Other people say that it is icum is something more like an altar or a window or doorway. And so the old tradition was to take the St. John's wort and place it above the altar or above the doorway or window to dispel evil spirits. So it's not really much of a stretch to see that as being a very early indication of an understanding of the antidepressant nature of the plant. But in traditional herbal medicine, St. John's wort is mainly used to ameliorate nerve pain. And so many times, you know, these simples, herbal simples like a St. John's wort tincture, are not taken by themselves. They're combined with other agents, and this will tend to reduce the possibility of side effects. Also, if one is experiencing a side effect, and I think side effects occur in only about 5% of the population of people who use the herb, then you can discontinue use saffron instead for making yourself happy. Maybe you don't have a saffron allergy, or you use less of it, or you combine it with other agents like marshmallow that are going to tend to, slow the process of digestion and help ameliorate any possibility of side effects. I've looked at what's available on the internet, and I think that the activities of the plant are very well discussed, and I'm not going to go deeply into that, but I saw nothing on the fact that the plant has two-phase growth cycle. In the first year, it is a repining plant that will grow along the Earth horizon, and in the second year, during the summer, it'll go up for flower. So that's a classic biennial nature, or sometimes it can be perennial, but generally the best harvest is in the summer, about summer solstice of the second year growth. Then if you don't have it, or if you've got something that you think is it, and then you check it out and you realize it isn't, it's a different species in the Hypericaceae, then it would, and if you don't have it growing in the wild where it's easily accessible and clean, as a roadside plant, I often wonder how clean the wild-crafted St. John's wort really is, then you can just grow your own. And so Strictly Medicinal Seeds carries verified seed of St. John's wort, and let's look at that seed. It's very, very fine. So in order to distribute it properly, when planting, you start with a little bit of sand. Put some sand in your hand, then sprinkle a little seed in there, mix it up, and that sort of stretches the medicine, you know, makes it more easy to plant and keep the resultant seedlings further separated from each other. So in order to plant, you plant right on top of a sandy medium. Yes, sand. Not sand mixed with potting soil, just plain sand. Any kind of sand. Coarse, sharp sand is best. Then you sprinkle the mixture of sand and seeds on top, and you press it in, and then you leave this in a warm place where there's sunlight, because the seed is a photosensitive germinator, photodependent germinator. Then you keep it moist. Don't let it dry out. Keep it moist and water it very gently so as to not float the seed. Tamp it very securely so that the seed has a sense of place. And you'll get germination within 5 to 10 days. The seedlings can be raised up in the usual manner, separated and individuated to a pot. Let them grow on until they're this one is grown out more than it really needs to be, but it's going to look something like this. Maybe it'll look more something like this. And then you plant that out to disturbed soil, which most of us who make our living from growing medicinal herbs know what disturbed soil is. That's what we do. We disturb the soil, and then we put preferred plants in that soil, and then we weed around the plants, and that's more disturbance. And so it doesn't require any particular fertilizer, a good thorough weeding from time to time, moderate watering, and you'll have plenty of St. John's wort in the summer of the second year. So that's the way to get it going if you want to have it around for your use. Simply being close to the plant is really uplifting to the spirit, and caring for it is uplifting to the plant and to the human as well. We are all connected, and if we recognize that connection, then we can be happy. Peace.